During the early days of the Trump presidency, a National Security Council official named Kevin Harrington had an interesting idea. He wanted to do this sort of radical military move as a preemptive gift to Russia. And so Kevin Harrington's former colleague told the Daily Beast, I believe it came out last night, that Harrington asked about the prospect of withdrawing or repositioning US forces from the Baltics, nations once part of the Soviet Union and periodically, historically, swallowed up by Russia, but that are not part of it right now. According to the ex-colleague, Harrington considered it a gesture to the Kremlin that would enable the nascent Trump administration to see if its desire for a friendly relationship with Russia would be reciprocated. It was included in a strategy paper that, conspicuously to the former official, made no mention of Russia as either a competitor or adversary. And that person said, "I sensed we were giving something and it wasn't clear what we were gaining in return." Now, while the proposal was ultimately not adopted, it's the first known case of senior aides to Donald Trump seeking to reposition US military forces to please Putin, something that smelled to a colleague like a return on Russia's election time investment in President Trump. That is according to the sources coming out of the Trump administration.
Well, the first national security official said it's not clear what we're gaining in return. I would argue that it is fairly clear. So whether it was interference in the election or the other favors that Putin and the Russians have done for Trump throughout his career, that's the obvious answer. Because at a bare minimum, as all the experts quoted in this article mentioned, well, if you're going to give the Russians something, you would at least have a conversation and get at least something for the American people or our security interests in return. It's a weird thing to come in there and go, okay, we're withdrawing our forces, and just as an act of good faith to Russia. I mean, as an act of good faith to the UK, Canada, okay, but even that's a little weird. Why aren't we having a conversation about it and figuring out what the right deal is? But to go to Russia, which has historically been somewhat of an adversary and now arguably more so, and go, here's a giant gift. Yeah. That makes no sense.
And a potentially consequential one. I mean, imagine we lived in some sort of crazy world where Vladimir Putin and Russia were invading and taking new territory. It would never happen in Crimea, or by proxies in Ukraine. As long as US forces are in those countries, it's very hard to imagine Russia moving in and trying to take any territory there, because then you're talking about the development of a gigantic war, a historic war. But if our troops aren't there anymore, it becomes significantly easier to do that. On the other hand, though, we do have to acknowledge that they did not actually do this. And unfortunately, we don't know from the information that has been leaked yet who it is in the administration that actually shot the idea down. It could be that it's Kevin Harrington's boss. It could be that it's Secretary of Defense. It might have been Trump and his team itself. We only know who was pitching it. And so let's say a little bit more about that. Harrington is the NSC's senior official for strategic planning. He had neither military experience nor significant government experience before joining the White House, but that's only because none of them did. But he did have an influential credential. As a managing director for the Thiel macro hedge fund, he was close to Trump patron and ally Peter Thiel, who we've talked about on the program quite a few times, actually. And among Harrington's ideas were a fervent belief that economic sanctions, particularly those on Russia, were ultimately harmful to the United States. And in March, long after what we were talking about, he proposed lifting US sanctions on Russian oil.
Okay, so there's two parts of this story. One is this Harrington guy goes inside the National Security Council. Is like, let's find 8 different ways to help Russia. Why are we lifting the sanctions? Senate ultimately voted 98-2 to increase sanctions, not to decrease them. But there's a guy put in by Trump going around going, let's take our troops away from the front. And there isn't an actual war front with Russia. I don't want people to get worked up over that, but it would be important to take away even the small amount of troops we have, 150 troops. You could make a separate argument for it, and you could put together a logical, smart deal maybe that gets us something in return. But to come in there to do that, then to say, okay, that didn't work, then let's lift the oil sanctions. Why are you trying to help Russia? What's your point?
But devil's advocate, if you believe everything that has come out about this person, it is simply because for whatever reason, it seems kind of crazy, but look, he's an associate of Peter Thiel, who is a crazy person. He's talked about setting up some sort of libertarian island, which sounds like something out of BioShock. But if you believe it, he just, for whatever reason, believes that there is this energy apocalypse coming, and the only chance we have in America is to ally ourselves closely with Russia. For whatever reason, that is what is going to save us. That's best case scenario, playing devil's advocate.
So that's Cheney-esque, paranoia about energy, et cetera. But look, that leads to the second important part of this story. Why is a guy with no military experience, no foreign policy experience, no relevant experience at all to the National Security Council, on the National Security Council? Because he ran a hedge fund, he was the managing director for a hedge fund for one of Trump's donors. That's preposterous. That's the swamp. They're giving away our government. They're like, oh, you ran a hedge fund. Would you like to run foreign policy? He was a senior, he is. He's the senior official for strategic planning when he has no experience in strategic planning in the military, for the military, or for defense, or for foreign policy. He runs a hedge fund, he has nothing to do with it. Then think about this level of corruption. What if that hedge fund, what if he's not panicked about energy security, and he doesn't know anything about the military and doesn't care about the military? What if that hedge fund has a lot of money invested in, whether it's in Russia or deals that would be affected by the sanctions?
The oil deals and stuff like that.
Then you've got a guy who was put in to make those deals happen at a place where he clearly does not belong. That's how they give away our government. That's how they give away our interests. So look, the Thiel Macro hedge fund, I don't know what they're up to, and I know that Peter Thiel is legendary investor in Silicon Valley. That is true. And he's given a lot of money and made a lot of money from a lot of those tech companies. But does he have energy investments? And why is this absolute amateur with clearly some other interest inside the National Security Council to this day trying to affect our foreign policy for God knows what reasons? What you just watched was one of the videos that we do today, but we actually do a whole 2-hour show every single day. It's a podcast. You could watch it in video or listen to it as audio. You can download it, you can stream it, and you get it completely ad-free if you could become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.